What is up, Flannelverse? We should have just gotten inactives. I have not read the inactives yet, so I'm going to start the show by taking a look at whether we have any impactful inactives. Sort of hopeful that we have some players missing. We have a lot of sort of chaos on this slate that I would like to sort out, like get rid of, some of those min-priced 49ers receiving options. That would be pretty helpful. So I am going to take a look at the inactives, and then we will be going position by position, starting with quarterback, running back, tight end. Sorry, running back, wide receiver, tight end. Looks like, oh no, this is not right. Anybody have? It's not. I'm not immediately finding it. Usually, you can find it pretty quickly on Twitter. If anybody in the comments has seen what the inactives are, let me know. That would be helpful because I'm not immediately finding it. I think that's a good starting place. I mean, we don't really need to worry about it for looking at quarterbacks anyway. But we'll be going position by position. Hopefully, you guys watched this morning show with me and Adam. Ship My Money Share. That was a lot of fun being back, doing content with Adam again, doing some DFS content with Adam again. We did a few best ball shows over the summer, but it's a lot of fun talking DFS with Adam. We already talked about it. We're going to be doing that again on Thursday. So at least one more show. I think that we'll probably continue doing. I think we both really enjoyed doing the show this morning, breaking down tonight's slate. So we'll be back on Thursday morning ish. I think around noon Eastern. We'll be doing another show. Looking forward to doing that with Adam. Congrats to Anthony. I know Anthony had a pretty big win last night. Turned like $30 into $1,000. I don't remember the exact, but I think he won over $1,000. So that was really cool to see and appreciate the shout out, Anthony, of course. All right. We'll start with the quarterbacks. And again, this is. No, you did not. You didn't see a tweet that CMC might be inactive. All right. I'm going to keep my eye on inactives because never mind. Christian McCaffrey, according to Underdog, Christian McCaffrey to be inactive week 1. Oh my God. That's a real thing. Christian McCaffrey is inactive according to Underdog. I thought you were pulling my leg, Anthony. That's a real thing. That is insane. Yeah, it is out. Christian McCaffrey to be inactive tonight. I did not see that coming. He said earlier this week that he was totally fine. He did not see it being an issue. No, Christian McCaffrey is inactive. Jordan Mason, come on down. It's definitely Jordan Mason time. It's definitely Debo time as well. Big boost to both Jordan Mason and Debo. Should get a little bit more work in the running game. I had not really thought about this possibility all that much because they didn't really give us any indication that this was going to happen. That part of it is easy. I'll have to think about whether we're going to play any tertiary options. Of course, I'll lean on the projections at Fantasy Points. I'll take a look at some projections around the industry to see how different sites are interpreting it, because that's also going to obviously massively affect ownership. This kind of changes. I mean, it does. It changes the entire slate. The fact that Christian McCaffrey is inactive. This is. I hope that you're off CMC, Sean. I am also off of CMC now that he's not playing tonight. Smart to pick up Mason in season long. If you can still get Mason on your team, if you have, I don't know, some other backup that you can drop, pick up Jordan. Probably most leagues you're not able to, but in your season long leagues, in your dynasty leagues, wherever you can get Jordan Mason, I would recommend picking up Jordan Mason because that is extremely impactful news. Christian McCaffrey inactive. All right, what other inactives do we have then? Do we have the rest of the 49ers inactives? Sometimes they put it out as Niners instead of 49ers. Should be out by now. All right, I'll look up Jets. Looks like, oh no, that's just my guess. Why are these not out yet? These should be up. Usually they're out an hour and a half before game time, and usually they post them on Twitter immediately. Okay, tonight's 49ers inactives. Christian McCaffrey is there. Interesting. Safety Hufanga is out. I had read that he might have some impact on the 49ers defense, might help them out a little bit, but he is out also. No other major inactives. So we have the 49ers inactives. I'll keep my eye out for Jets as well, but I'll get into it. We'll start going through position by position. I mean, that just flips the entire slate on its head. Obviously, I've been saying that I'm probably going to be underweight on these quarterbacks. It's probably still true that I'm going to be underweight on the quarterbacks. It obviously makes it pretty easy to more easy to fit the quarterbacks in your lineups now that you can play Jordan Mason at 3,000. Um, it does impact things a bit. I'm probably a little bit more inclined to play the quarterbacks now that we get the cheap Jordan Mason. Like, the quarterbacks will fit into your lineups easier. I think that'll push up the ownership on quarterbacks quite a bit overall because it is so easy to fit them in your lineup. They're obviously going to project the best. I think a lot of, like, anybody using an optimizer is going to get a ton of Debro. We talked about that. That I had not foreseen this. That is not, like, I thought about a lot of different things. Maybe we're going to get Jacob Cowing out. Little things that might have tiny little insignificant impacts. Didn't even cross my mind that CMC might be out after he said he's not concerned about his injury. It's not going to impact him. That is just insane. Debro says Debo is a lock. We'll get to wide receivers. Definitely, Debo was already a great play. We talked about that already. That Debo, not on this stream, I guess. All right, I'm gonna stop losing track of myself. I'll start with the quarterbacks. Yes, I think that they are going to be easier to fit into your lineups now that we have McCaffrey out. Now that you can play, Jordan Mason at 300. Quarterbacks get a lot easier to fit in your lineups. I do think it pushes up ownership quite a bit as well. I think these quarterbacks probably end up more like 60% owned, 65, 70. I don't know exactly, but it's going to push up the ownership on the quarterbacks. I think I'm still going to be underweight to the quarterbacks, still play through the thought process of this could be a low scoring game. I talked about this with Adam this morning. I keep referring to that. So some of you have not watched that. So I'm sorry. I'll explain. I think I'm going to be a little bit underweight to the field on the quarterbacks because I think that this is a game that it's going to be very slow pace. I think both of these teams play at a slow pace. So we're already dealing with a slow pace game. Then we have two great defenses. Now, of course, McCaffrey's out. So it's possible that this will be a very low scoring game. And in a low scoring game, you're more likely to get points out of skill position players. It's easier to score points as a skill position player because, again, you get a point per reception, you get more points per yard, you get more points per touchdown. So it's easier to score points. I mean, without the touchdown, even it's just easier to score points as a skill position player than it is for quarterbacks without scoring a touchdown. The quarterbacks, to get there, you really need them throw in for a couple touchdowns, or obviously they can run for touchdowns. Neither of these quarterbacks really runs a lot, though. So they really need to score touchdowns to put up many fantasy points. And I'm anticipating that this is going to be a low scoring game, probably not going to be a ton of touchdowns. Now, that might not be right. It's still two very good offenses. They might score a lot of points, but I think that is the way that I'm going to play it, is as though that it's going to be a low scoring game. And that way you can get off of the quarterbacks. If they don't score, throw more than one touchdown a piece, something like that, they're not going to score a lot. They're not going to score a lot of fantasy points. So my approach to quarterbacks is I'm going to be probably underweight to the quarterbacks, especially now. I think that they're actually going to get pushed up in terms of ownership, and it's going to be harder for the Niners to score. I still think it's going to be a slow paced game. So I can't say that they're bad plays. Like, they're two of the top projected plays on the slate, both Brock Purdy and Aaron Rodgers. I don't want to tell you not to play them. I'm just saying that is going to be my approach as a way for large field tournaments. Again, I'm all of my analysis revolves around large field tournaments. That's what I play. I play the largest field stuff. So, with that in mind, trying to get a little bit different, play it different from the field. The cleanest path to winning, I think, is playing it without the quarterbacks in your lineups. Assume that it's going to be a low scoring affair, that the players that get into your lineups aren't going to get there through touchdowns, but they're going to get, there'll probably be some touchdowns, but they're going to get there mostly through receptions, through yardage, et cetera, et cetera. So my approach to quarterbacks on this slate, I'm probably going to be somewhat underweight on both Aaron Rodgers and Brock Purdy. I'll say this as well. If you want to play them, you should correlate. They both are statue quarterbacks. Neither of them really runs much at all. You want to be stacking them with at least one pass catcher anytime you have either of these quarterbacks in your lineup. My preference would be multiple pass catchers if you have them in the flex. In the captain spot. If they're in the flex, you can just single stack your quarterback. If you have either of these quarterbacks in your captain spot, I think it's a good idea to double stack them with pass catchers on the same team. So that's basically that's all I've got to say about quarterbacks. We'll see if these projections have updated for the news that Christian McCaffrey is out. I will say I think they do these projections at fantasy points, they do it for like season long and stuff too. So I don't know how much of I still think they'll update these. pretty quickly. All right, so McCaffrey's still in there. Makes it a little bit tough, but I can give you the general rundown anyway, which is Jordan Mason is the RB2 on the Niners. He's only $3,000. Now he's the RB1 on the Niners tonight. He's going to be a great play. He should probably be in your lineup like that. The only way it doesn't hit is probably an injury. I mean, it could hit without an injury. It could, not hit without an injury, just because, like I said, it could be a very low scoring game. Maybe they don't involve him that much in the passing game. Maybe he ends up rushing for 45 yards and it's not enough. He gets, 6 fantasy points. That it's certainly possible. I think that he probably goes underowned with this news coming out so late. So I think that Jordan Mason is just a jam tonight. I'm going to be playing a ton of Jordan Mason. My guess is that the field doesn't play quite enough Jordan Mason. And that's with the field probably still playing, I don't know, 75-80% Jordan Mason. Maybe I'm selling it short. Maybe it'll be even more than that. Maybe the field adjusts more than I'm giving him credit for. But yes, I think Jordan Mason is an amazing play. I like that this news came out so late because some people have already made their lineups. I mean, actually, let's take a look at DraftKings. I want to see how many people have already entered, because that will give you an idea of how much of the field might play McCaffrey. Yeah, so it looks like in the $15 Millie Maker, 127,000 entrants. People have already entered out of 176,000. Now, most of those will be, or not most, but a lot of those will be 150 maxers, people that are going to adjust very easily. But I would guess that CMC still comes in 5% owned. So there's another note. You should enter. You should play tonight, because there will be people that have Christian McCaffrey in their lineups. I think that he'll be in, I don't know, at least like 3% of lineups would be my guess. I think that there will still be a lot of Christian McCaffrey lineups out there. Could be totally wrong about that. That's just kind of what we've seen in the past. Is if you see a star player that gets that's inactive kind of surprisingly pretty late, you still see some ownership on that player. So I would imagine there will be some lineups with McCaffrey in there. Reduces the rake a little bit. Yeah. So Jordan Mason, fantastic play. Obviously, don't play Christian McCaffrey. It also, we'll talk about Debo when we get to wide receivers, but yeah, I think it pretty significantly boosts Debo as well. He was already my favorite of the Niners receivers. I think this just makes it that much better for Debo. But thinking about the other Niners, Juszczyk, I don't think it gives him like some huge boost. I think they're just going to play it through Mason and Debo, kind of covering the McCaffrey role. Might help him a little bit, makes it slightly more likely that they give it to Juszczyk at the goal line. But he's the same Juszczyk that he has always been. $600, 2.2 fantasy points. Didn't really do a whole lot last year. I pulled this up earlier. I guess I'll just pull it up again. Juszczyk's game log from last year. Shout out Debro. Shout out Fantasy Points. Sorry, Fantasy Pros. Shout out Fantasy Points also, by the way. That is the site that I'm using here for most of this stuff. But this is the Fantasy Pros looking up the game log. He did have a game with 12.6 fantasy points once last year, 10.6 another time. Both of those games, he scored a receiving touchdown. As you can see, he had 17 total targets last year, 14 receptions. So he's targeted basically one time per game. Did score a couple touchdowns last year. Had some games. He had a lot of games with 0 targets, and then a few that he actually had, a handful of targets. So could be, maybe he gets a little bit more involved without Christian McCaffrey out there. Makes him, I think, a slightly better bet to pay off. But he is a thin bet. Like it's unlikely that Juszczyk gets there, but it's still, if I were MME, and I would have some exposure to Juszczyk. This, maybe boosts his odds just slightly with McCaffrey out, but it doesn't it's not like he's going to take on a big part of the rushing game. Or at least I wouldn't expect. So yeah, for me, Jordan Mason, awesome play. He's only 3,000. You could even play him in the captain spot. I think he's only 4,500 in the captain spot. He's going to project really well. Hard to argue against Jordan Mason. Breece Hall, fantastic play also. 10,200. He had the second most fantasy points of any running back last year. You kind of know who Breece Hall is. He's a great running back. He also is facing a Niners defense that last year gave up 5.1 yards per carry during the playoffs. They gave up like 150 yards on the ground throughout the playoffs. Yes, Lily. So anybody coming in late, Christian McCaffrey has been ruled out. He is inactive for this game. So Jordan Mason wheels up. Get Christian McCaffrey out of your lineups. That's my takeaway there. Breece Hall, yeah, facing. I think the Niners probably will be improved, but they're also missing some of their defensive players. So I think it might be a better spot than Breece Hall. Than like intuitively, you kind of think the Niners is a tough matchup. I think it is probably a tough matchup, but you can only choose from players in this game. I think Breece Hall, pretty good bet to put up a lot of fantasy points. So yeah, I think Breece Hall. I'm going to be playing a good amount of Breece Hall. Also expect Aaron Rodgers to target him quite a bit. Like we saw him, Aaron Rodgers, when he has capable pass catching running backs, historically, he will target them. Like when he played with Aaron Jones, he targeted him frequently, including in the red zone. So I really like this role that Breece Hall has this year playing with Aaron Rodgers. He's only 10,200 only, projects for about 20 fantasy points. Yeah, I think Breece Hall is a great play. Maybe the more interesting discussion, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis. So Braylon Allen, kind of a big bruising rookie running back. Unclear what his role is going to be. Like all the reports are that he has won the RB2 role for the Jets. But we thought that about Blake Corum. Blake Corum didn't play at all last night. He played behind Ronnie Rivers. Braylon Allen is also a super young running back. I think he's 20 now, maybe. He's very young. Wouldn't be that shocking if he doesn't play a lot. Also wouldn't be that shocking though if he does vulture at the goal line. Like I think he might get that goal line role. We one thing we've learned this week is we really don't know what these teams are going to do. All of the signals this summer seem to be that Braylon Allen won that running back 2 role, and then we can kind of speculate just based on him being a bruiser that he should take on that goal line role. But we're all kind of guessing that as far as that goes. It's also pretty likely that Breece Hall just still has that role. So yeah, I think Braylon Allen is playable, but I think there's a wide range of outcomes with Braylon Allen. I think it could be just a 0. He might be just like contingent behind Breece Hall. That's when he would get some run. I also think that it is possible that he has that goal line role. So yeah, Braylon Allen, I think is a very reasonable play at sub 10% projected ownership right now. I will definitely be playing something around 10%. Braylon Allen would be my guess. Isaiah Davis, though, also we saw with Ronnie Rivers last night. We don't really know what the running back pecking order is here. Maybe Isaiah Davis plays more than we're expecting, and he's going to come in at lower ownership. He's only 200, so he would need to do less. I'd say he's playable. Not a huge priority for me, but I think that you could, if I were MMEing, I would have Isaiah Davis in my player pool, I guess is how I would say it with Isaiah Davis. This is a good question. Marco asks, how much salary should we leave tonight now that CMC is out? Probably at least 1,000. Like in general, I think you probably want to leave at least $1,000 on the table. It makes it much easier to leave salary on the table. Most people are still going to want to use their full salary cap. So I like the idea of leaving at least $1,000 on the table on DraftKings, try to avoid dupes somewhat. I mean, honestly, that wouldn't be crazy leaving 2,500, especially on FanDuel. Like I often leave quite a bit. Yeah, so I'm going to have a lot of lineups that don't have any quarterbacks, which a lot of slates I won't. Like there are tons of slates where I will have a quarterback in every lineup. I think tonight I'm going to have more lineups than usual that don't have any quarterbacks in them anywhere. I still think, there's some of the top projected plays on the slate. If you think one of the quarterbacks is going to throw multiple touchdowns, you should probably have that quarterback in your lineup, especially now that it's easy to fit them in. But I'm going to probably be underweight to the quarterbacks because I think I'm going to play it as though this game is just really low scoring at the quarterbacks don't get there. They don't really run a lot. So without throwing touchdowns, they're not going to put up a lot of fantasy points. So yeah, if you think they're going to throw multiple passing touchdowns and you want to play it that way, I think it's totally reasonable to play one or both quarterbacks in your lineups. It basically always is with the quarterbacks. Like they're always some of the top projected plays on the slate. It's just the way that I'm trying to get different tonight is by playing some more lineups that don't have any quarterbacks in it. Just play it as though there's not going to be a ton of touchdowns scored in the game. Oh, I forgot. I'm moving around. I've moved on from quarterbacks already to running backs. We talk about all the running backs. I guess let me refresh this one more time. See if anybody else popped into the projections at running back now that we have Christian McCaffrey out. Curious to see where we have Jordan Mason projecting now. And I'm going to go look elsewhere also, but I want to see if they have updated for this. All right, here you go. Updated projections at fantasy points. Jordan Mason up to 15.5 fantasy point projection at 3,000. I mean, he's going to make it into all the lineups. Patrick Taylor, interesting, now up to 4 fantasy points. So I do think Patrick Taylor also becomes really interesting. Juszczyk actually looks like he got a little bit of a bump also, but I think that, and Isaac Orendo. Yeah, I still have not seen inactive, so that's good. So all of these guys are active. So it is kind of a cluster, but Jordan Mason is the presumptive RB2. That all the reports were that he won the RB2 role. Preseason usage would indicate that he won the RB2 role, but obviously a cleaner path now for other running backs to get involved. And it's also Jordan Mason isn't Christian McCaffrey, where like if Christian McCaffrey is starting and healthy, he's going to get every carry that they can give him until he's tired and they need to bring somebody else in. Jordan Mason obviously doesn't have that kind of a stronghold on the backfield. So it's easier to play an RB2 on the Niners than it would have been with McCaffrey. So we're probably going to get Patrick Taylor a little bit too low owned. Isaac Garendo, really good athletic score at the combine, was like, I don't know, had some numbers that are super rare for a running back. I don't remember what they were exactly, but he looked really good at the combine. Maybe he gets a little run, another rookie. And then, Juszczyk got a little bit of a bump here. I still think it's unlikely that Juszczyk gets a ton of carries. Could be wrong about that. But I think it's Jordan Mason leading the backfield. Maybe they work in Patrick Taylor, Kyle Juszczyk, Isaac Orendo. My rankings would be, I think Jordan Mason, I think, is still the best bet, but he will get the most ownership. Patrick Taylor, pretty interesting as a large field GPP play now. I think not a lot of people are going to play Patrick Taylor. I think he becomes the best minimum priced option on the slate. So definitely pretty interested there as well. I will play a good amount of Patrick Taylor. And again, we've talked about this before. Last night, I was all about playing 2 Detroit running backs on the same team. This is a great spot to play 2 Niners running backs, just given the pricing on these Niners running backs, and given that they could rotate quite a bit. I think that it's a great spot to play multiple Niners running backs, and just, even if they do split, if it's a 50-50 split between Patrick Taylor and Jordan Mason, they're probably both gonna, hit at least a nice score for their salary. You probably need more than a handful of points, which is all you really need. But I think that it's definitely useful. It's definitely an interesting idea, at least for some of your lineups in larger GPPs. I'm not saying like slam it in all of your lineups, but I think probably, again, not a ton of people will play two running backs from the Niners in the same lineup. I think it'll probably go a little bit underutilized. People will make their guess on who's the guy. And maybe there just isn't a bell cow like there is in McCaffrey's there. Maybe it's a 60-40 split in Mason's favor. I think, the projections sort of indicate what I think is correct. It's, Jordan Mason probably gets the first crack. Maybe he holds on to it. Maybe he gets the bulk of the carries. Patrick Taylor, probably the number 2. Isaac Orendo has been kind of a wild card. Like, he was a wild card in best ball. Some people drafted him. Some people are like, he's going to be a 0 all year. He might have an opportunity. He's apparently active. So at least you can think about playing Isaac Orendo. Who knows? Maybe he gets into the game. But I think my rankings would be Jordan Mason, Patrick Taylor, Isaac Orendo, Kyle Juszczyk, I think would probably be my order of preference of the Niners running backs. But all of them certainly are playable. I've seen people Juszczyk 2 TDs aggressive. I mean, it could happen. It would not be that shocking. He's definitely a big guy. Could play at the goal line. All right. Wait, what are we saying? What about Marco? What are we saying? What about? Did I say something wrong? Maybe I misspoke about something. I don't know. So I think we've covered the running backs well enough. Now let's see I'm curious if how much of a projection boost they give to Debo here. So was projected for 15.2 fantasy points. Would expect him to get a bit of a boost with no McCaffrey in there. Should have more opportunities as a running back. Debo certainly capable of playing out of the backfield. So yeah, I'm guessing that we'll see a little bit of a spike in projection for Debo as well. That'll be everywhere, and so that will affect ownership also. But I love that we got this news late enough that probably not everybody will adjust. Yeah, up to 17. So he was, I want to say 15.8 or something, up to 17 fantasy point projection for Debo. Now projects better than Garrett Wilson, slightly less expensive. I don't think that we're unique in seeing this with Debo. I think every site is going to give him a bump with McCaffrey out. I think everybody was already kind of thinking about, McCaffrey was potentially limited. Everybody was kind of thinking about that already. It's a great matchup for Debo, just the way the Jets play defense. They play a lot of too high, as I recall, from Debro's article. Debro wrote a primer on this game, talked about how the Jets played, I want to say it was too high, at like the third highest rate in the NFL last year, something along those lines. And Debo had like a 26% target share, was very good, did very well in those matchups. So it was already a Debo game relative to the other receivers. Also, in case you had not heard, Brandon Ayuk is limited. According to head coach Kyle Shanahan, he would be surprised if Brandon Ayuk is not limited. Now, what does that mean? I don't know exactly what he means by that, because Kyle Shanahan is the guy who gets to decide how much Ayuk plays. So I guess Ayuk maybe has some say in that too. But yeah, he would be surprised if Ayuk is not limited in this game. So we're expecting not quite a full snap share for Ayuk in the game. Also thinking that he will probably get some shadow coverage from Sauce Gardner. Sauce Gardner this summer has been saying that he'd like to do more shadow coverage on teams' top receivers. So all of this bad news for Ayuk. I think Ayuk is the one most likely to get the Sauce Gardner treatment tonight. So all of this, many points in Debo's favor. But I think everybody kind of knows this now. I think he's going to be super highly owned, as he probably should be. I really like Debo. I'm going to play a lot of Debo. You should probably play a lot of Debo too, but so will everybody. It's not going to be an under the radar type play. All right. Other Niners. Juwan Jennings also probably benefits from Ayuk being limited. So you can see here he's 4,000. We just saw their last game, Super Bowl. Juwan Jennings hero. I think he's fine. He's the wide receiver 3 on the team always. He was last year too, and he didn't really do a ton for most of the year until the Super Bowl. But he did have a pretty big game in the Super Bowl. Signed a nice contract this summer. Probably is a little bit more valuable. Projection gets a little bit of a bump with Ayuk out. We don't really know how limited Ayuk is going to be. So if Ayuk is more limited, then that's good news for Juwan Jennings. I think he's in play. I think he's going to be low owned. Let me see if I can. I'm going to go take a look at some updated ownerships across the industry, because I kind of have an idea. Just like on my own, I can kind of guesstimate how ownership will be affected, but still never going to be as good as people who are running it algorithmically, putting out their own projections. Those ownership numbers are going to be better than anything I can give you. Interesting. Wait. This is all right. Never mind. I'm the one I'm looking at is definitely not correct. So I will look elsewhere. Still had McCaffrey in. So let me give you an update on where ownership is looking on sites that do them. Give you a guesstimate. I won't give you exact numbers of stuff that's behind a paywall, but just give you kind of a general idea of where the sites are showing these numbers at now. One second. All right. None of the sites I'm looking at have updated for ownership yet. They've updated, I think, for projections, but we're not updated yet for ownership. So we'll wait a little bit, and I will take a look again around the industry, but we can kind of guesstimate. We can kind of guesstimate what the ownership numbers are going to be. Debo will be chalk. Ayuk will be, I think earlier in the day, he was projected for mid 20s ownership, around 25% to 30% around the industry. My guess is that he gets a little bit of a boost without McCaffrey. It's unclear with Ayuk exactly what his limitations are going to be. If it's just on him to be like, I'm getting winded, you need to take me out. Who knows? Maybe he still does have 80% route participation. Something along those lines is only slightly limited. that could be. He's only been with the team for less than 2 weeks at this point. Unclear what kind of what his fitness level is right now, but we're expecting him to be somewhat limited in some capacity and covered by Sauce Gardner. I still think 25% ownership is totally fair for a receiver of Ayuk's caliber. I'm probably not going to be above the field on him, just because I am concerned about the Sauce Gardner treatment, about the being limited, not knowing exactly how limited he's going to be. So yeah, I have concerns about Ayuk, but I do think if he remains around 25% ownership, I think that's fair. If he gets too much of a boost, if he's 35-40% with Christian McCaffrey out, I still think he's probably a light fade for me. I would rather go to some other places, leave a little bit more salary on the table. Certainly prefer like Garrett Wilson, but see any other. Okay, so the other 49ers receivers that you could consider here. So we've got Jacob Cowing, Ronnie Bell. Is Jacob Cowing inactive? I think, let me go check one more time. I had checked well after they should have come out and did not see anything on what the 49ers inactives are. So I was hoping that maybe we would get one of these receivers inactive, kind of make things a little bit cleaner. I did read it already, and we didn't have. Okay, and for Jets, we have, so Izzy Abanikanda is out for the Jets. No other impactful offensive players. Okay, so it is kind of a mess if you want to play it through any of the other receivers on the Niners. So again, making the assumption that Ayuk is limited, obviously benefits Debo. Juwan Jennings were already the starters here. So who else comes in if Ayuk is, like, say he's only playing 50% of the snaps or something, who benefits from it? And that's kind of unclear. So it's a sort of a tough slate from there's a ton of value. Probably some of it's going to be good. Other than Jordan Mason, it's kind of hard to know what the good value is going to be. I think that you can consider Ronnie Bell, Jacob Cowing, or Chris Conley. I think are three receivers for the Niners that you can at least consider in your lineups. They're all very inexpensive. We'll get to tight ends also. Yeah, Kittle obviously, definitely gets a boost with no McCaffrey. But as far as just the wide receivers go, there are a number of options to consider. If you think that Ayuk is going to be very limited, and you think we're going to see more of these other receivers, which certainly is possible, you can consider Ronnie Bell, Chris Conley, maybe Jacob Cowing, kind of a speedy rookie. They're all fairly thin bets, I think. I don't think any of them is particularly likely to matter in this game, but I think like one of them is likely. Like, I think it's pretty likely that one of them sees the field for at least like 10% of snaps. It's not clear which one of them it would be. Probably Chris Conley is the best bet of the Niners receivers. But I'd be lying to you if I told you I had a strong take on which of them is likeliest. My ranking though would be Chris Conley, Ronnie Bell. I think Jacob Cowing is the least likely to see the field tonight. So I think all of them are viable if you're playing 150 lineups. Hard for me to prioritize them because I don't think any of them is going to see like 50% plus the snaps. I do think that Ayuk is probably going to be playing still more than 50% of snaps. So I think one of Conley, Bell, or Cowing is likely to see the field for 10% plus of snaps. I don't think any of them reaches like 50% of snaps at their price. They score a touchdown, they can get there. But I don't really love any of them. I think Conley would be my favorite of the group. As far as Jets receivers go, so Garrett Wilson, we know what he is. I pulled this up earlier, but he last year was like third in the NFL in here. I'll pull this up. This is just the second half of the year. He was second in the NFL third in the NFL, I believe, in expected fantasy points. So this is we're looking at the fantasy points data suite now, by the way. If you want access to this, anything at fantasy points, Flannel Man gets you 25% off. All right, so and I have just the Jets pulled up here. Taking a look sort of by expected fantasy points in the NFL. Okay, he was fifth. Okay, he was fifth in terms of expected fantasy points in the entire NFL last year. 303 expected fantasy points, only scored 215. And you see all the other receivers around him scored significantly more, even those well below him in expected fantasy points. And that's just a testament to how bad the quarterbacks were for the Jets last year, which we all know. We all know how bad they were. Now he gets Aaron Rodgers, Hall of Famer, coming in. Who knows how good Aaron Rodgers is going to be, but he's certainly an upgrade on what they had last year. Garrett Wilson should have a good year. You can certainly play some Garrett Wilson. He is going to be one of my top plays this week. Hard to argue with Garrett Wilson here. Maybe it gets a little bit lower owned because everybody wants to play the Niners. We also have, so Mike Williams is 6,600. The Jets have said that Mike Williams is going to be on a limitation of some sort. They say he's on the same trajectory as what Breece Hall was on last year. Breece Hall played like 34% of snaps in game one last year. Obviously, it's not a one-to-one comparison. It is wide receiver versus a running back. If we see Mike Williams playing 34% of snaps, maybe he just comes in the red zone. Maybe he is still like their big red zone threat. You would think Mike Williams is a guy that they want to use when they're near the end zone. Like that's the perfect role for Mike Williams. So he could get there at 6,600. The latest I've seen is that we're still expecting like mid-teens ownership on Mike Williams. And I've gone back and forth on this throughout the day. Like, to what extent I'm interested in playing, like what would the ownership number need to be for me to have a ton of interest in playing Mike Williams? And I think it's sub 10% would be the number for me. So I think he's coming in a little bit too high owned for me. I really think the only way he gets there most likely is if he scores multiple touchdowns because of the price tag at 6,600, which is possible. Like he's a great touchdown scorer. But I don't think I'm playing it. I think I'm going to be fading Mike Williams. If he scores a couple touchdowns, I will just say on to Thursday is my plan with Mike Williams. He's not expected to play a ton against a tough defense. So yeah, I'm out on a 6,600 Mike Williams. Then we get Xavier Gipson, Allen Lazard. I think Mike Williams is going to be limited to the extent that both Gibson and Lazard are very, very much in play here. Gibson playing in the slot for the Jets, but I think Lazard actually significantly outsnaps Mike Williams in this game. I think there was I just watched a little clip from a Jets beat reporter before I came on, and that's essentially what he said, is that he thinks they're going to take it slow with Mike Williams. They really want him. They want to make a Super Bowl run, so they don't want to be using Mike Williams right now. They want to save him for later on in the season when they're trying to make a Super Bowl run. So I'm expecting Mike Williams to be pretty limited here. I think that we're going to see Allen Lazard out there quite a bit for the Jets. I think he's going to get outsnap Mike Williams, as I said. Fantastic play, not projected for a crazy amount of ownership last I've seen. So yeah, wheels up for Allen Lazard, even if you don't believe in the talent. I mean, the opportunity is there. I'm not a huge believer in the talent. Yeah, I think solid play there. Allen Lazard, and then Gibson as well. I think Gibson is going to start in the slot. He also does benefit from Mike Williams not being out there. Obviously, you would expect the target share to go up for Xavier Gibson. So I think both very, very much in play. Probably the ownership goes down a little bit on both of Lazard and Gibson. And I'm seeing sub 20%. Yeah, Gibson, we're seeing actually Gibson at lower ownership than Lazard. I've been on Lazard all day. I'm still very into Lazard, but I'm very into both of them. I think Gibson looks like he's actually the lower owned, like maybe even sub 10% ownership. Maybe Jordan Mason pushes that ownership down a little bit. I think both very much in play though. Two of my favorite plays on the slate: Allen Lazard, Xavier Gibson. Part of the reason that I'm not as interested in the Ronnie Bell, Jacob Cowing, Chris Conley tier is that I think that the Jets receivers are just not that much more expensive, and they're much better bets, and the ownership is not really there. Now, maybe it'll surprise us. Maybe they do come in at significantly higher ownership. But I think I think Gibson and Lazard, fantastic plays. Malachi Corley, the Jets did not call up. I was just reading as I was looking. Somebody was pointing out the Jets didn't call up anybody from the practice squad. Malachi Corley is active. He was one that I was sort of hoping would be inactive, so we didn't have to think about it. Malachi Corley is a rookie who, unclear. I don't think he's going to see the field a lot. He is the type who could just be brought in as like a gadget receiver, and maybe he scores a touchdown. 1,600. I think he's in play in a 150 set. I would have some Malachi Corley in a 20 lineup set. I probably would not have any Malachi Corley. That's about where I land with Malachi Corley, in part just because Lazard and Gibson are only a little bit more expensive, not getting crazy ownership, and I think just significantly better bets. Like they're just going to see the field significantly more. The opportunity is going to be there. So I don't think I'm going to play a ton of. I don't think I'm going to play Malachi Corley tonight. I'm only playing 25 lineups as now. If I were not on the show, I would probably increase that because I think there's a lot of edge tonight. But if I were playing 150 set, I would certainly have some Malachi Corley. But you have to accept that there is certainly a possibility of the zero for Malachi Corley. Maybe even probability of zero, I think, is maybe the likeliest outcome there. So you just have to keep that in mind when you play them. Wide range of outcomes, but most of the time it's going to be a zero for Corley. All right. Mason was a must-have cuff of CMC, and now we're talking about Patrick Taylor. I mean, he's still, if you didn't see the projections earlier, we're expecting it to be Jordan Mason 15.5 fantasy point projection, Patrick Taylor 4 fantasy point projection. So even with CMC out, Patrick Taylor not projecting extremely well. But I think because he's 200 and because it is a big unknown, like I think he becomes very interesting at this point. I think that we've talked about every receiver that I have any interest in playing, so we can talk about tight ends, and I will again refresh this. So George Kittle was projected at 10.8. I'm curious to see what his projection goes to with CMC out. Give it a second. I'll take a sip of my beer. All right, barely budge. 10.9, the new projection for George Kittle. Surprises me a little bit. I would think that he would have gone up a little bit more than that. But Kittle, obviously a strong play. And I'll pull up this is the final 5 games of the season last year across the league, schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed per game. So being at the top means that the defense gave a lot to that position. The Jets gave up the 4th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to tight ends over the last 5 games, 5 weeks of the season last year. So theoretically, great matchup for George Kittle. Should get a little bit more run here. I'm pretty into a $7,400 Kittle. I think obviously the ownership goes up on Kittle as well. With McCaffrey out, you can expect him to be fairly highly owned. He's only 7,400, a little bit easier to get in your lineups than Debo. The other, like the clean plays on the slate are like Debo, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. They're all significantly more expensive than George Kittle, and George Kittle is on that list as well. Very clean. Like none of them have any kind of injury limitation concerns. So yeah, I like Kittle. I think that he probably gets a good amount of ownership at 7,400, but I think he probably deserves that ownership, particularly with McCaffrey out. I think a little bit more likely that he gets a little bit more run. Yeah, I didn't think that you were talking directly to me, Hoosier. Although I was pretty in on Jordan Mason the last couple of weeks. I think there's tonight I feel very good about that pick right now. Obviously, Jordan Mason in best ball. Outside of Kittle, I don't think I'm playing Jake Tonjes. I don't think he's 0.7 fantasy points. Maybe he scores a touchdown. If he does, it's going to bite me. I'm not playing him. Kittle, the only tight end I'm playing on the Niners, and I think he's a strong play. Tyler Conklin, I gave the stat earlier, 61 receptions last year, 0 touchdowns. That was the most receptions of anybody in the entire NFL last year without a touchdown. I think that it's pretty likely that he's going to score some touchdowns this year. If he has 61 receptions again, pretty good bet that he's going to score some touchdowns this year, especially now that he's playing with Aaron Rodgers instead of playing with Zach Wilson. So I like Tyler Conklin quite a bit. He is one of the better point per dollar plays on the slate. Less of a necessity. Maybe the ownership goes down a little bit now with Jordan Mason just being the very obvious play. But I like a $3,600 Tyler Conklin. Think he's a really strong play. I think that he should get targeted a good amount. I think he was projected for around 30% ownership earlier, which honestly, I was hoping it was going to be a lot less than that. I was sort of surprised to see how much ownership he's projected for. I still think that he is playable at that number. I think I'll be close to 30%. He'll be in close to 30% of my lineups. Hard to argue with Tyler Conklin. Jeremy Ruckert, also pretty interesting. Here, I'll pull this up. I was looking at this earlier, and for the year, in terms of like snap share, route participation. Jeremy Ruckert, 20%. We had Conklin at 61%. Later in the season, though, and I just sort of picked at random here. And I have no idea like when this started, but Give me a second here. Did the Jets? They didn't make the playoffs last year, did they? I'll just pull these up anyway. Later in the year, starting in week 11, just kind of refreshing to see where we're at. So it was 20% route participation earlier in the year, or for the entire season, 27% though over the end of the year. So Jeremy Ruckert gets 27% route participation. Let's see his yards. I actually didn't look at his yards per route run, which is sort of interesting. 1.52. Actually, that's really good. So for a tight end, 1.52, pretty solid in the yards per route run department. Conklin up at 1.25, so a little bit worse than Jeremy Ruckert in terms of yards per route run. He did pretty well when he was out on the field running routes. So it wouldn't be that surprising if Jeremy Ruckert kind of retains that role of maybe even gets up to like 35% route participation. Suddenly he's, pretty inexpensive on this slate. Obviously could score a touchdown, has Aaron Rodgers, benefits the entire offense having Aaron Rodgers there instead of Zach Wilson. So Jeremy Ruckert at 1,200, I think is one of the better. I think I like him better than any of those cheaper San Francisco wide receivers who I think they're playable. Chris Conley, Jacob Cowan, like you can consider them in large field stuff if you're MMEing, but I think Jeremy Ruckert probably a better bet than the min-priced San Francisco receivers. Maybe not Juwan Jennings. Probably Juwan Jennings a better bet. But like the Ronnie Bell, Chris Conley, Jacob Cowan, I think I'd rather play Jeremy Ruckert than that tier of receivers on the Niners. So I think that's all of the like position players, skill players that I on the slate. Defenses and kickers, I do think are great plays. Again, going back to the way I'm likely playing this slate is for a low scoring game. I think that I'm anticipating that this is going to be a low scoring game, or I shouldn't even say that's what I'm anticipating. That is how I like to play this slate. I think that's a way to play it where you can get different is by playing it as though it's going to be a low scoring game. So not playing quarterbacks, but also playing a lot of kickers, playing a lot of defenses. It's the boring way to play. It's, not the game that the average fan wants to watch, but I think that is a way to get a little bit different from the field in a way that I think is fairly likely to hit. I mean, these are two great defenses, two slow paced offenses. I think that it's a pretty a smart way to play this game is as though it's going to be low scoring. The position players rack up PPR points, rack up some yards, but just can't get in the end zone. Play it through the kickers, play it through the defenses. I think it's going to be a big part of my builds for tonight. And I'm realizing now I'm still showing running backs there. We talked about running backs. We talked about receivers. We talked about tight ends. So sorry, growing pains here as far as putting this display up here. I think defense's kicker is very strong. I'll build a few lineups. I'll take any questions that anybody has about anything on the slate. Happy to take any questions you have. Sorry, I've been kind of ignoring chat because I've been too excited. I've been too excited about Christian McCaffrey being out. Anthony says Gibson over Lazard. I think both are very, very strong bets. Can't really go wrong with either of them. I think you could play both of them in the same lineup. I have no issue with that. I'm guessing we covered this. McCaffrey is not playing here. Okay, yeah, Easy was telling me before I saw it, all of the Niners receivers active. Kind of annoying. I was sort of hoping that we would see somebody inactive from that group, make it a little bit easier for us. All right, I'm going to stop scrolling up. This goes up further than I thought it was going to. So if you have new questions, feel free to throw them. I don't know what that. Not worried. I thought he played for them anyway. I don't know what that means. I'm sure it was in reference to something I said. Ayuk or Kittle would be Kittle for me. Again, Ayuk limited, probably getting the Sauce Gardner treatment. So it would be Kittle for me of that group. Spurious news is always Chris Conley. Sure. If you want to, I think he's a fine play for me. That's an interesting point. The best ball says, I think Ayuk plays more than expected now. That could be the case. Like maybe they lean on Ayuk a little bit more with no McCaffrey. They have fewer skill position players. That's a reasonable take for sure that Ayuk could get a little bit more run. Again, so I think I'm full fading Mike Williams. Like that limitation concerns me a lot more. Ayuk, I think it's just like he's going to play as much as he can. Like I think whatever his fitness allows, which these guys are athletes, so they want to be out there, they want to compete. So probably going to be a lot which is, again, why I'm not really that into the min-priced 49ers receivers. I'd play them in a 150 set, but all right, scrolling down. Lazard, a broken man in here. I mean, he was really bad last year, but he's back with Aaron Rodgers. They're best buds. Aaron Rodgers, some like positive quotes about him this summer. Aaron Rodgers wants him to be a thing, so you gotta factor that in. It was like when Rodgers was still in Green Bay and they had Christian Watson there. It felt like they were just like forcing Christian Watson touchdowns at the goal line, and he like tripped over himself. I feel like multiple times. I think it's a thing. If Rodgers wants Lazard to score a touchdown, he's going to try to force it. So there's some positives for Alan Lazard. Just that Aaron Rodgers really likes Alan Lazard. All right, scrolling down more. Wait, they said the same thing about Brees last year in week 1, and he scored like 20 points. What are we referring to here? In week 1? No, Brees was very limited in week 1 last year. Ben says, had to drop Purdy as my backup for Mason to save me from the CMC news. I'm up 6 versus Moody. It's true. Yeah, I mean, you need to. That was the right move. Absolutely. Tough to drop Purdy, but like you're very live to win that. All right, scrolling more. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate the kind words. The fuck are you saying, bro? What word did I say? Listen to that almost Canadian pronunciation of this Minnesotian of the word out. Oh, out. Oh, that's the word. Out. I think I say it like just anybody. Good to see you though. Tonight we are back to the New Glarus Spotted Cow. Got to answer the important questions. I'll keep scrolling. What's up, David? Good to see you. Good to see you. I really appreciate you all hanging out with me while I go over this slate. I'm super excited to be doing Showdown content again. This is so fun. He cannot play, so you don't have to worry about this, Marco. He is inactive. They cannot play him tonight, so don't worry about that. I think we'll still see CMC in some lineups. People have, kids, things that keep them from adjusting. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate it. On any onslaughts I like. Yeah, I think in general onslaughts are going to go underutilized. I did not actually read the ETR report on what the breakdown is going to be, but I watched their show earlier and it sounded like they're anticipating a lot of pretty even builds on this slate. I'm trying to decide if that changes now without McCaffrey in. Probably gets a little bit. Probably you get more Niners builds now with McCaffrey because everybody's going to want to play Mason. Now everybody's going to say play Debo, Mason, throw in a Kittle, throw in a Purdy. So maybe we see more Niners onslaughts now that it's a little bit easier. FanDuel. All right. Let me see if I can make some FanDuel lineups as well as we're going through them. I'm gonna get right on making some lineups in a second here, guys. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Optimal captain Mason or Debo. I don't really run optimals generally. Would guess that it's Mason. Just allows you to fit in whoever you want since he's projects so well point per dollar. Yes, I'm definitely willing to leave more salary on the table than normal because you can. I mean, because you have Mason at 3,000 projecting close to the top of anybody on the slate, and I'm playing it for a low scoring game. So absolutely. Brees had 18.7 week 1. All right, am I thinking of 2 years ago? Maybe I'm thinking of 2 years ago when Brees only played like 34% of snaps. All right, I'm going to start making some lineups. All right, let's Spotted Cow. That's they don't sell it outside of Wisconsin, so shows you that I was in Wisconsin last month. That's why I have some Spotted Cow here. I was in Wisconsin last month, and I've been on several vacations, so I haven't drank it. All right, let's play around with this a little bit. And are we looking at? Nah, I don't think that'll overlay. Maybe reduced rake on this one. All right, so playing it my preferred way of assuming that it's going to be a low scoring game. I think we can still go to, I still think Brees Hall is probably the better bet. Really solid bet at captain. Now I do think Jordan Mason is just a really, really great play on the slate. So I'm going to throw Jordan Mason in here. I think you can throw Patrick Taylor in as well. You don't have to. I'm not. I don't think he's going to be in all my lineups, but sort of interesting. So now we have 10,500 left per player and 0 players who cost more than that. So now you can throw in Garrett Wilson, Deebo Samuel. As I said, I'm going to play it as though there's not a ton of scoring. Quarterbacks don't do much. So this is how easy it is to leave salary on the table. If we assume that it's a low scoring game, now you can throw in George Kittle. I mean, you could still throw in a quarterback at this point, and you're leaving 2,900 on the table. This is like a very good lineup. I guess Patrick Taylor is the one that you could upgrade pretty easily there. So maybe this isn't the best example. I forgot we do have a pretty off the wall bet in Patrick Taylor. Yeah, so this is not the best bet. I was going to say you could throw in like a kicker, but so now so we're leaving. So we have 12,100. Now we throw in Kittle. I mean this. So this lineup would. Okay, we only have 4,700 left over, so we don't need Patrick Taylor to outscore the quarterbacks. You don't need Jordan Mason to outscore the quarterbacks. You just need Wilson, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, because neither Patrick Taylor nor Jordan Mason, 4,700 doesn't get you up to the quarterbacks. So you need both. You need Jordan Mason to outscore up to Mike Williams, which he's projected better than all these players. So this is how easy it is to leave a ton of salary on the table. You need Patrick Taylor to outscore. So Patrick Taylor is the tough one. So you need him to outscore everybody up to 4,900 for this to be optimal. And you do have the kickers there. You have Tyler Conklin there. So it's kind of asking a lot. You need Patrick Taylor to do something if you leave this much salary on the table. So maybe the better bet would be, I mean, this could be Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard could very easily outscore the defenses and the kickers. Now we're leaving 2,900 on the table. This is a very plausible large field GPP lineup, leaving 2,900 on the table. So it's very, very easy on this slate to play it as though there's not going to be a lot of touchdowns. But if you wanted to, you could also just go, I think that, we are going to see Aaron Rodgers is going to throw some touchdowns. He's going to throw a touchdown to Breece Hall. He's going to throw a touchdown to Garrett Wilson. Leaving 1,300 on the table. You have Aaron Rodgers in there. Like it's so easy. This is a slate where very easy to leave salary on the table. A lot of different ways to build. I think you can leave a ton of salary on the table though if you want to play it as though it's going to be low scoring, like I plan to play it. Ooh, Castellan, Grendo will win you all the money tonight. He could. I think he's my third favorite of the group, but it also would not shock me if Grendo plays ahead of Patrick Taylor. At least I don't think he's playing ahead of Jordan Mason. I think it's Jordan Mason is like the pretty clear RB1 tonight. But I wouldn't be that shocked if Grendo played ahead of Patrick Taylor. Who is your most exposed captain? It might be Breece Hall. Now that McCaffrey is out and it's so easy to spend up, you can basically play whoever you want. Could be Breece Hall, could be Deebo. I think those two are my likeliest captains. I don't think I'm playing a ton of quarterback at captain in this one, if any. So I think it's going to be probably Breece Hall, Deebo, Garrett Wilson. Maybe I'll probably play some Jordan Mason also, but my guess is that it would be those three for the most part are going to be my favorites. It's going to be Breece Hall, Deebo, maybe some Kittle also, just like that Omega upside. All right. See, Chase says, running late this afternoon, loaded my lineups early, just saw CMAC news, going to be a grind next 30 minutes. Yeah, exactly. And there will be other people who don't think of coming back to their lineup. So we will, I think, see some people paying the rake with some McCaffrey tonight. Yeah, thank you for the reminder, Sean. If you guys could like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's all really helpful. I actually have not updated the subscriber goal. Added many new subscribers, which I really appreciate over the past 24 hours, doing a ton of Showdown content. So I do think that I'm up a little bit from the number that's showing on the screen, but I'm trying to grow the channel, trying to get to 3,000. During the NFL season, if I can go higher, I'd love to go higher than 3,000. Trying to grow the channel, and I'll be doing Showdown content Monday, Thursday, and Sunday prior to lock every week. So I'll be here doing a lot of Showdown content, and then now. As I said earlier in the show, Adam and I are going to be doing another show on Thursday morning. All right, I'm going to keep. We've been almost an hour, but I'm going to build a few more lineups. I said I would do FanDuel also. Oh no, CMC unlikely to play next week as well. That is, man, that's a bummer. I mean, it's fun for like adjusting to Showdown. Don't get me wrong. Ownership for Deebo at MVP on FanDuel. Let me check some places. I think it'll be high. I think it'll be very high. Well, you said CMC, right? Let me see. What other sources do I have? I have many. Oh, yeah. 1 second. I'll check out the ownership on CMC FanDuel captain. I'm guessing he's... Oh, sorry. You didn't say it. You said Debo, I'm sure, because CMC is not playing. I hope you said Debo. All right, lower than I thought. So sub 10% is what I'm seeing on Debo, and I'll check another source. Second source has it as... Wait. Projected ownership. Also single digits on Debo. Where is Debo? All right, well, that's just wrong. My usual sources are not being very reliable tonight, because this one has it as sub 1%, which is definitely wrong. So that's very strange. Maybe I'm on, I'm on the right slate. But I think it'll be probably 10%-ish on Debo if I had to just guesstimate where I think his ownership is going to be in the MVP, because I'm not finding reliable sources here. All right. Let me see. All right, let me try to make it. I'll make another DraftKings, and we'll move on to FanDuel. So let's see, if we do a Jordan Mason captain lineup, what does that look like? Can we just use all the salary if we do Jordan Mason at captain? Probably. So I think we go immediately then to Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Debo. We still have $79.50 left per player with 2 spots left. So you can't play both the quarterbacks if that's what we're inclined to do. Could play one of them still. Here's where I would go. So you do that, getting all your points from these running backs, elite receivers. There we go, George Kittle, throw in a Moody. Now we have 3,700 left over. Really strong lineup. No reason that all these players can't outscore the quarterbacks. No reason that Jake Moody can't outscore everybody up to 8,500. He would have to outscore Ayuk. I think it's very plausible that he outscores Ayuk. So yeah, I think that's, this is the kind of lineup that you see, and it's like, yeah, you leave 3,700 on the table. Still very plausible that this lineup wins the slate, or instead of Moody, maybe you go 49ers D, still leaving 3,300 on the table. Really easy to make good large field tournament lineups on this slate, because you can so easily leave a lot of salary on the table. So I think you can make lineups that won't be duped a ton very easily, that are still going to project really well. All right, let's take a look at some. Hopefully I can get into my FanDuel account again. And then maybe I will go back one more time and look at try to find the ownership again, because I don't know what's going on where literally every source I'm looking at seems to be broken right now. It's across like multiple different sites. And I have not entered. So I can pull this up though. Right. All right. So FanDuel. So remember, you need your highest scoring player in FanDuel needs to be in your MVP spot. So the highest scoring player within your lineup needs to be in the MVP spot, because there is no salary multiplier. So again, I think Breece Hall, great play in the MVP spot. Man, Deebo Samuel only 11,500. That should pull down his ownership in the MVP spot a little bit. So maybe he does come in sub like 5% owned. I doubt it, because I think everybody wants to play him. I would guess he's 8%, something like that, 10%. But you have 10,500 remaining per player after putting in Breece Hall, Debo, and Garrett Wilson. Where's Jordan Mason? Okay, 7,500. So now you can afford to play up to Garrett Wilson. Oh no, we already have him in the lineup. So you throw George Kittle in here, and you have 2,500 left over. Now we've got both Kittle and Debo and no Purdy, which is plausible, could happen. A little bit less likely on FanDuel where it is half point per reception. Still can happen because again, still have similar scoring dynamics, but it is half PPR instead of full PPR. So it's a tougher bet for all these players to get there without the quarterback. The quarterback, a little bit of a better bet on FanDuel than DraftKings. I still like the idea of playing it as though there's not a lot of passing touchdowns and the quarterbacks don't get there. I still think that's a way to get unique when everybody has the salary to play for quarterbacks. I think it'll be a little bit unique. But if you want to play it the other way, you could certainly go. I mean, since we have Debo and Kittle in this one, I mean, if you wanted to play Brock Purdy in that lineup, can't blame you for that. This, my guess, would be a pretty chalky build. Like this is maybe going to be among the chalkiest ways to build on FanDuel right now with this group of 5 players, maybe mixing and matching, mixing who is up in the MVP spot. So probably playing Jordan Mason in the MVP in this lineup would make it slightly less duped. I mean, maybe more than slightly, but I think it'll still be duped. I think a lot of people have the idea of playing Jordan Mason. The field has gotten pretty sharp. So I don't think like this kind of lineup, maybe you avoid some dupes by putting Jordan Mason there instead of Breece Hall for sure. But you also, decrease your odds of this being the winning lineup for sure also. So this is will be not duped 1,000 times kind of lineup, but it'll be duped. All right. Any other questions? Let's see. Your Debo's captain is projected now. Oh, Debo in the captain spot projected for about 15% ownership. Interesting. You have no Mason. I mean, it's a risk. It could work out. Maybe it's more of a rotation. Like we're making the assumption that he's the bell cow with CMC out. I think that's the safest bet is that he is the bell cow with CMC out, that he does get a majority of carries, but we don't know for sure how they want to split this backfield. I think it's 80% likelihood that Jordan Mason takes on 60% plus of the workload. Maybe not even that, because he also do have Debo mixing in there. So we could just see Debo playing more out of the backfield than we're expecting. So I think Jordan Mason's a great play. I think he's a very strong bet to get a lot of workload, but it's also not a guarantee. Like they could go other ways. They could play more Debo than we're anticipating. So if you want to fade him, I can't really blame you for that. All right. Yeah, I'll take a look again at the captain ownership various places. Give me 1 second. So you want to see quarterback captain ownership lower than I thought. So between 5 and 10% is what we're projecting quarterback captain ownership to be. So, it's reasonable. That's not a crazy amount of ownership. I will, if you are playing either of the quarterbacks at captain, I would be double stacking them. I think that is the best bet is because they're not going to run that much. I think Purdy may be a little bit more likely than Aaron Rodgers to rush one in, but neither of them is a great running quarterback. So I think I would still prefer to double stack if I have either of the quarterbacks in the captain spot. Let me check another place. Okay, my second source. Oh no, wait, sorry. Yeah, still similar actually. Okay. So like between 5 and 10% projected captain ownership for both of the quarterbacks, which that's kind of reasonable. Like that, as much as I want to fade the quarterbacks, I think that's totally reasonable ownership. Just remember, if you play them at quarterback, make sure that you are double stacking, or at least I would recommend double stacking if you play a quarterback at captain, again because of the scoring dynamics. So the pass catcher outscores the quarterback on every single passing play. If the quarterback is just focusing too much on one receiver and they both make it into the lineup, the receiver probably going to outscore the quarterback. So you really need them to be spreading the ball around to be the optimal captain if they're not a rushing quarterback. Mason overuse check. He's at least much better odds of putting up a lot of fantasy points. He will take on the RB1 role, whereas Juszczyk is still probably just going to be mostly, might see a couple targets in the game. He's mostly just a fullback though. Could have a goal line carry. So there are ways for Juszczyk to get there for sure. He's a better bet with Christian McCaffrey out, but he's not going to take on like the RB1 role. He's still going to get pretty limited opportunities. Whereas Jordan Mason has wide range of outcomes, but I think like a lot of opportunities is within that range of outcomes for Jordan Mason. So I would rather make that bet. But again, he is actually, let me check where Mason's ownership is coming in at this point. Lower than I thought, honestly. Let's see. Want to check multiple sources. So generally, okay, so actually a wide range. Looking at my different sources of ownership on Jordan Mason in general. Let me go back to DraftKings here. But we're seeing like some places sub 50% projected ownership on Jordan Mason. That would surprise me if he's sub 50%. Maybe, I mean, it could be right. I'd be pretty surprised if it's sub 50%. All right, see, this is just can't be right. Another place has him at sub 30%. I can't imagine that he comes in at sub. That's just in the flex, but I can't imagine that's right. I think but everywhere has him like sub 65%. So if he comes in that low, I think I'm into it. I'm into Jordan Mason. I'm going to play quite a bit and leave some salary on the table. All right. I need to go make some lineups. You guys need to go make some lineups. Really appreciate all of you. Yes, I would consider playing both kickers. Sorry, missed that question. I would absolutely consider playing both kickers. I think that it's viable on this slate. All right, I'm sorry if I missed any of your questions. I need to go make some lineups. I'll be back Thursday morning. Me and Chip will do our morning show again. I'll be back Thursday evening to do this show again. Really appreciate all of you hanging out. Appreciate you for subscribing to the channel, liking the videos, commenting, all of that very helpful. So appreciate you guys, and I will catch you on Thursday. Good